factories nearly 200 miles inland. This was no ordinary air raid, it was a calculated strike meant to cripple Ukraine's one true asymmetric edge, its drone industry. In moments, the quiet would collapse, and a multi-phase war story was about to begin. The strike began less than 4 minutes after the jamming drones crossed into Ukrainian airspace. Russian warships in the Black Sea launched 6 Caliber cruise missiles, each traveling at nearly 600 miles per hour, using the drone's electronic interference as cover. Their targets were 3 of Ukraine's most critical drone plants, 2 in Dnipro and 1 in Pava facilities, that had been producing hundreds of low-cost reconnaissance and strike UAVs every week. Ukrainian air defenses responded quickly. Newly delivered Patriot Pack-3 batteries, still undergoing software calibration, managed to intercept 4 of the missiles, but 2 slipped through. At 4:49 a.m., 1 missile slammed into Plant 17 Ampere in eastern Dnipro. The warhead detonated near the main assembly hangar, triggering a chain of explosions that ripped through the production floor. 5 senior engineers were killed instantly, more than 20 others injured, and over $60 million worth of equipment and unfinished drones were reduced to twisted steel and burning wreckage. Power lines sagged, melted from the heat. Satellite images later showed the once bustling compound turned into blackened rubble. This was more than a physical blow, it was a strike at Ukraine's creative lifeline. By targeting the very facilities that allowed Kyiv to level the battlefield with cheap, inventive technology, Moscow hoped to erase Ukraine's edge in the skies. But the attack only set the stage for an inevitable and devastating retaliation. In the smoking aftermath of Plant 17 Ampere's destruction, Ukraine had little time to mourn. By mid-morning, less than 6 hours after the strike, senior commanders and engineers gathered in a dimly lit underground bunker outside Kharkiv. The walls were bare concrete, the tables scarred from years of use, the power flickering under the strain of emergency generators. But around those tables sat some of Ukraine's most hardened tacticians and its remaining UAV specialists. Their mission was simple, yet daring. Design a counterstrike that would not only punish Russia, but restore Ukraine's shattered confidence. They called it Operation Black Swarm. The plan was unlike anything attempted before. Instead of relying solely on drones, Ukraine would assemble a layered, multi-domain assault. The first line would be electronic warfare. UAVs, crude but effective machines cobbled together from civilian components, designed to blind Russian radar for 3 to 5 critical minutes. Behind them, suicide drones rigged with old Soviet TM-62 anti-tank mines would follow. Their purpose not only to strike targets, but to explode violently if intercepted, scattering shrapnel through Russian air defenses. Above, MiG-29 fighters would provide cover, armed with American-supplied AGM-88 anti-radiation missiles, ready to hunt down any Russian radar that switched on. From over 40 miles away, Hawaii Mars rocket artillery and M777 howitzers stood poised to fire suppressive barrages the moment Russian defenses reacted. And on the ground, just west of the border, Leopard 2nd and aging T-64 tanks waited in concealed positions, prepared to exploit any gap the aerial assault created. What emerged was not a desperate swarm of homemade drones, but a new kind of combined arms operation, an improvised doctrine where cheap, expendable UAVs worked hand in hand with advanced Western systems and old Soviet armor. It was risky, fragile, and untested, but for Ukraine, this was more than revenge. It was proof that even in the face of devastating loss, innovation and coordination could become weapons in themselves. As the strategy took shape in that underground bunker, one officer put it plainly, "We don't have stealth bombers. We don't have limitless missiles. What we do have is imagination, and tonight, imagination fights back." At 1:05 a.m., the first wave of Operation Black Swarm took flight. 15 jury-rigged electronic warfare drones, each no bigger than a pickup truck bed and carrying crude broadband jammers, lifted off from makeshift launch pads near Sumy. They flew low, hugging the terrain at just under 200 feet, their guidance locked to preloaded GPS coordinates. Above them, 2 MiG-29 fighters roared into the night sky, releasing a spread of decoy flares and electronic bait designed to lure Russian radars into locking on. Within minutes, Russian operators at Nuke Base 22 scrambled their defenses. The base was ringed with Pantsir S, one-gun missile systems, and Tor-M, two short-range interceptors, both designed to swat drones out of the sky. Streams of 30mm autocannon fire and surface-to-air missiles lit up the darkness, chasing the incoming drones. But what should have been a coordinated defense quickly unraveled. The Ukrainian jammers poured out random bursts of interference across multiple frequencies, colliding with the decoys launched by the MiGs. Radar screens inside the Russian command bunkers went from sharp tracks to scrambled static. Some operators reported phantom contacts. Others saw their systems go completely blind. For nearly 5 minutes, the defenses that were supposed to shield one of Russia's most strategic nuclear sites lay effectively paralyzed. It was just a sliver of time, but it was exactly the sliver Ukraine needed. From the Ukrainian perspective, this was the door being kicked open. Every commander in the Kharkiv bunker knew that success or failure of the entire operation hinged on this opening act. If the jamming drones were wiped out too quickly, or if Russian radar regained its picture, the follow-on waves would be shredded before reaching their targets. But as the clock ticked toward 1:10 a.m., the picture was clear. The Russian defenses were stumbling in the dark. The first wave had done its job. That temporary blackout in the skies above Belgorod wasn't just a tactical victory, it was the signal for the next phase to begin. What came next would test the very limits of Ukraine's improvisation, unleashing weapons designed not only to attack, but to explode violently, even in failure. The opening door had been forced, and through it, the real storm was about to surge. At 1:12 a.m., just as Russian operators were still struggling to regain their radar picture, the second wave of Operation Black Swarm arrived. This time, it wasn't just jamming signals, it was raw firepower strapped together with desperation. 40 improvised drones, each carrying a 30-pound Soviet TM-62 anti-tank mine duct-taped to its fuselage, swept in low from 3 different vectors. They weren't designed to survive. They were designed to detonate. As the first group breached the outer airspace, Russian Pantsir S-1 batteries and TOR-M-2 interceptors finally found their targets. Cannon fire tore across the sky, but each interception triggered the Ukrainians' real plan. When those drones were struck, the TM-62 mines ignited in midair, transforming the night sky into a storm of shrapnel. Within minutes, 2 Pantsir systems were shredded beyond use. Their tracking radars perforated, and their crews either wounded or forced to abandon their stations. At the same moment, over 25 miles away, Ukrainian crews manning HIMARS rocket artillery and M777 howitzers executed their fire mission. Precision-guided rockets arced over the border and slammed into the outer perimeter of Nuke Base 22. Explosions rolled across fuel depots, vehicle staging areas, and barracks dugouts, throwing defenders further into chaos. The combined pressure from the air and ground meant that Russian operators were fighting blind and deaf, overwhelmed by both shrapnel and artillery barrages. For Ukraine, this was the turning point. The teeth of Russia's air defense network were starting to break. The second wave was never expected to obliterate the entire shield, but to punch holes wide enough for the strike force behind it. And that mission was succeeding. By 1:16 a.m., smoke and fire blanketed the radar corridor. Communications chatter inside the Russian command bunker turned frantic. Some units reported no visual contact. Others screamed about incoming salvos they couldn't track. What had begun as a confident air defense posture was devolving into confusion. The grid that was supposed to protect Russia's nuclear assets was no longer intact. It was splintering, piece by piece, under the weight of crude drones, Soviet-era explosives, and precision Western artillery. And through those cracks, the third and deadliest wave was already on its way. By 1:18 a.m., with Russia's radar grid fractured and its air defenses reeling, Ukraine unleashed the third and deadliest wave. From concealed launch pads across the border, 70 suicide drones surged into the night, splitting into 3 attack corridors. Each carried between 5 and 10 pounds of high explosive, small by conventional standards, but devastating when delivered in swarms. Their flight paths were staggered, designed to converge on Nuke Base 22 in less than 2 minutes. High overhead, 2 Ukrainian MiG-29 seconds circled at a safe distance, their radars locked onto the last surviving Russian sensors. At the exact moment the swarm crossed into the inner perimeter, the jets fired AGM-88 HARM missiles, screaming at twice the speed of sound toward the remaining radar emitters. Seconds later, bright orange fireballs bloomed where the radars had been, plunging the defenders into deeper blindness. On the ground, the assault expanded. From hidden staging points just a few miles west of the border, Leopard 2 tanks and older T-64 seconds surged forward under the cover of night. Their engines roared as they crossed into Russian territory, targeting outlying guard posts and fortified bunkers. The Leopards, with their modern optics and fire control, picked off Russian armored vehicles in rapid succession, while the T-64 second provided suppressive fire against dug-in infantry. Inside the base perimeter, chaos multiplied. Russian troops fired wildly at the incoming swarm, but the sheer number of drones overwhelmed them. Some UAVs dove directly into armored vehicles, turning them into flaming wrecks. Others clipped the tops of fuel tankers, or smashed into parked trucks, igniting secondary explosions. In at least 2 cases, drones struck already damaged air defense systems, detonating their own ammunition and creating chain reactions that tore through nearby vehicles. The battlefield had erupted into a multi-domain firestorm, drones saturating the skies, MiGs hammering radar nodes, tanks carving into the outer defenses, and artillery still pounding from the rear. For the defenders of Nuke Base 22, the attack no longer felt like a series of isolated strikes. It was a synchronized onslaught, a storm designed to hit from every angle at once. This was the operation's climax, the moment Ukraine's gamble turned from audacity into reality. And as the smoke and fire spread across the compound, it was clear. The base's defenses were not just bending, they were breaking. By 1:24 a.m., the assault reached its devastating peak. The swarm of suicide drones punched through what little remained of Nuke Base 22's defenses, and struck with lethal precision. Several slammed directly into fuel depots, igniting towers of flame that lit the night sky. Others crashed into the command bunker's ventilation shafts, triggering violent secondary blasts that collapsed portions of the underground structure. To the east of the compound, a cluster of drones ripped through hardened hangars, where long-range bombers sat exposed. Massive fireballs consumed the aircraft in seconds. Then came the most catastrophic blow. One drone, flying lower than the rest, penetrated the nuclear fuel processing wing. The detonation wasn't nuclear, but the chemical reaction of volatile materials produced a shockwave equal to a 500-pound conventional bomb. Concrete bunkers cracked, metal doors tore from their hinges, and entire sections of the facility caved in. A fireball hundreds of feet high roared upward, visible for miles across the border. The ground itself trembled, sending dust and debris raining down on fleeing Russian troops. For more than 7 hours, Belgar 22 fell silent. No signals, no transmissions, nothing but smoke and chaos. What began as a tactical strike had escalated into a strategic earthquake. Russia's nuclear bastion was no longer secure, and the illusion of invulnerability had gone up in flames. By dawn, the scale of the destruction at Nuke Base 22 was undeniable. Entire bomber wings lay in twisted heaps, fuel depots continued to burn, and hundreds of Russian troops and technicians were counted among the dead. Ukraine had done the unthinkable. It had struck a strategic nuclear installation on Russian soil and crippled it. In a single night, hundreds of lives were lost, and billions of dollars in equipment erased, shattering the image of Russian invulnerability. The strategic fallout was immediate. Moscow was forced to reroute command authority to backup nodes, leaving its nuclear deterrence in the region weakened for days. NATO raised its alert levels across Eastern Europe, and global oil prices spiked nearly 9% as markets absorbed the shock of nuclear instability. What was intended as a punitive strike against Ukraine's drone industry had backfired into a moment of global consequence. And yet, deeper questions remained. If one wave of improvised drones and combined arms could dismantle one of Russia's crown jewel bases, what other sites were truly safe? How would Moscow retaliate to restore its pride and deterrence? But beyond the tactical and strategic layers, lay a message more profound. Modern warfare is no longer ruled solely by expensive missiles or stealth bombers. It is shaped by ingenuity, layered tactics, and the will to adapt. Amid the inferno, Ukrainian soldiers were seen guiding wounded Russian prisoners